execution, part of the Merck webinar series. My name is Mohammed Nayal. I'm a senior consultant at Merck, and I am excited to share with you today takeaways from my years of experience working as an advisor with both public sector and private sector entities in the region, where I helped them develop strategies in different areas. Now, how will this work? Over the next 30 minutes or so, I will go over a number of slides, after which I will open the floor for your questions. As we go through the presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window located at the bottom of your screen as I go along. We will capture your input and we will try our best to answer as many of your questions as possible at the end. So, let us test the chat screen and see if it works. Can you type in yes into the chat screen if you can hear me clearly? Okay, thank you, Randa, Osama, Ruba. Thank you very much. Nizar, yes, welcome. All right, excellent. Excellent, thank you all. So thank you for joining us again, and I hope you find this webinar both informative and interesting. Just a quick summary of my background. I started my education in engineering and transitioned over the years into strategy, where I worked in the financial sector with HSBC America. I co-founded a startup called Correlation that developed data mining tools. I also worked in consulting with McKinsey. My assignments included projects such as education reform in Bahrain, economic investment policies in Saudi Arabia. And after working in the private sector, I spent 7 years working in the governments of Dubai and Abu Dhabi on innovation, technology, and strategy, including working as an advisor in the executive office of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, where I was involved in the launch of various strategic projects. Now, analyzing and solving problems is an area that I am passionate about, and I hope to share that passion with you in the next slides. So let us begin. What will we be talking about today? Well, our agenda will be focusing on the following. First, I will give a brief overview on the changing role of the analyst and the characteristics that successful analysts should have. Next, I will give an overview of problem solving, and this is a critical part of an analyst's job. And then I will talk a little bit about the importance of structuring problems. Then I will talk about the steps that analysts should take in the process of problem solving. This should take us about 30 minutes, and I will then go on to answer as much of your questions as possible. Let us begin with discussing the role of the analyst in today's environment. The International Institute of Business Analysis describes the person performing this role as someone who can be a connection between stakeholders, somebody who understands the structure, policies, and operations of an organization, solutions that enable the organization to achieve its goals. Now, this is a very broad definition and can include anything and everything. The reality is that the role of the analyst is constantly changing. The modern effective analyst is a generalist who knows how to solve problems and can do so by approaching problem solving in a structured manner. Questions number 2 and 3 deal with the characteristics and competencies of an effective analyst. So what are competencies? Well, competencies are abilities or attributes described in terms of behavior that are key to highly effective performance within a particular job. These competencies, they focus on how tasks are achieved and not necessarily what is achieved. I've listed a few of the characteristics and competencies that effective analysts should have. This is not all of them, but just a select few that I will use to highlight the changing role of the analyst. Now, first of all, communication. Communication skills are very important. Of course, not just to an analyst, but to anybody who wants to be successful in a business setting. This includes various things such as active listening. Nobody likes communicating with someone who only cares about speaking and doesn't take the time to listen to the other person. But communication skills also includes nonverbal communication such as body language, clarity, confidence, and the ability to convince both upper management and colleagues. These are all skills needed for a good communicator. The second characteristic is teamwork. This includes someone who is able to participate with different people at varying levels. People who have, of course, very different personalities. And this person is able to give and accept positive and constructive feedback. Good team workers also know how to make use of ideas and how to take good ideas and make them even better. They're also very good at decision making and, of course, can practice open communication. The third characteristic is self-management. The best employees are those who can motivate themselves and push themselves to do even better. There are many experiments that show that people who have higher discipline and better self-management are in general more successful. One of the really interesting experiments I've seen is something called the marshmallow test. And in that test, what they do is they put a marshmallow in front of a child and say, look, you can have the marshmallow now, or you can wait for 30 minutes and have another marshmallow. Of course, a lot of the children eat the marshmallow right away, but those who were able to actually wait for 30 minutes, they measured their performance over the years and they found out that in the long term, these people who have more discipline and more self-management are actually more successful. Then we have critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally. Somebody with critical thinking skills can understand the links between ideas, determine the importance and relevance of arguments, and recognize and build arguments. Finally, we have professionalism. This means that effective analysts are people who can be depended on. When they say they will do something, they do it to the best of their abilities. They're professional in the way that they deal with everyone, not just their managers, but also customers and team members. Now that I've given you an overview of the changing role of the analyst, let me go into the essence, really, the focus of what an analyst does, and that is to solve problems. Now, to solve problems in an effective way, you have to begin by structuring them. So what is structuring? Now, problem structuring is a technique for breaking down complex, messy questions into manageable subsets of issues. So why do you think breaking down problems is important? So if it would be great if actually you could type into your text box, what is the good thing about breaking down complex problems into smaller issues? What does that do? How does that help us? All right, let me give you a few minutes to actually type things down. I see Usama and Abdullah are typing. All right, good. So Abdullah says solving the problem partially until you solve it totally. I like that very much. That's great. Muhammad is also typing. So let me give you another 30 seconds so we can get the answers. All right, Arshad says, so we can be able to resolve the problem in step instead of one big step. Absolutely. And Muhammad says to understand the problem clearly. Very good, excellent, excellent. So what I will do is tell you a little bit about why I think dividing issues into manageable sections helps you solve the problem. Now, breaking down problems into smaller components, it's a great way to give you a better understanding of the problem. And also, I see one of the answers is, as Zat was saying, it's easy to understand the problem. And also, I see an answer to be able to plan properly. But one of the the good things about breaking and dividing issues into manageable sections is that it gives you a better understanding of the problem. Absolutely. For example, the issue of car accidents in a country is not something that is easy to solve. There are a lot of moving parts, and there are many components that can be the cause. So before going in and suggesting solutions, like saying that we have to decrease the speed limit or we have to increase the number of fines, you really have to understand what causes car accidents. This can be different things, such as people driving dangerously, road structure, environment, availability of police. Sometimes it can be animals crossing the road, rules or regulations. There are all these different things. So one thing is gives you better understanding of the problem. The second reason is by structuring problems, work can be divided into manageable pieces. So it's very difficult to do everything at once. We need to be able to work on smaller parts, and by solving each one by itself, we can get a solution to the entire problem. The third reason is so priorities can be set. Now, there can be many causes for a problem, but you need to prioritize. Which ones should you work on first, as you can't necessarily work on everything at the same time. The final reason, and something that I'd also like you to think about, is responsibilities. When working on a complex problem, usually you have many people working on it. When breaking down problems into manageable parts, you can also put different team members on different work streams. So for example, in our car accident problem, we can ask one of our analysts to look at dangerous driving behavior, whereas another can look at the structure of roads, and someone else can research the effectiveness of our laws and regulations. So the next question is how? How do we structure problems? Now, one of the really good tools that I've seen being used before, and this is used in many consulting companies, is logic trees. And logic trees are just a very simple tool that are also called issue trees. This starts by taking the overall problem and breaking it down into logical components. Let me give you an example. So let's say that we were working at an organization that produces toys, and we are faced with a problem of reduced profit. So a question to you is that what are the two main components of profits that you would need to look at to be able to solve the problem of declining profits? Type in your answer now. So I see Arshad is typing in. Okay. Decrease in revenue and increase in expense. Absolutely. So if you think about it, the problem of profit equals revenue minus costs. But then you can go into it a little bit deeper. So for example, if you see that revenues is not the problem and costs are the problem, then you start dividing it into different issues. So when it comes to cost, the different components of costs are variable and fixed. So if you look at fixed, for example, they can include things such as rent, taxes, salaries, equipment depreciations, and others. And you can examine each piece to determine if it is a component you can or want to change. So that's just an overall view of structuring problems. And the example that I gave you is a very simple example, but you're surprised by, when faced with a complex issue, how much it really helps to break down something that is huge, that is complex, into its different parts. So let me give you an example now of a solution to a problem that actually didn't cause the right effect. It actually made the problem worse, because I think we didn't look at the people solving the problem didn't look at the different components. So a very good example that makes this clearer is what is called the Cobra effect. Now, the term Cobra effect comes from a story set at the time of the British rule of India, the British occupation of India in the early 1900s. Now, the British government was concerned about the number of deadly cobra snakes in Delhi. So what should policymakers do to reduce the number of cobras in the city? So what do you think? Anybody can come up with a solution to reduce the number of cobras in the city? Type in your answer now. Okay, Usama and Abdullah are typing. All right, limit food and destroy potential hiding places. All right, restrict them. All right, so let me go on, fumigation of the areas. All right, okay, good. So one of the things about put water in outside the houses or in the city. Okay, outside. Very good. So interesting thing. So what actually happened was the British government said, let us actually restrict them. And how are we going to do that? We are going to offer a reward for everybody who finds and kills a cobra. Now, they came up with this reward and people were very excited. They saw this as an actually way of increasing their income. So in the first 6 months, the number of cobra attacks started to decrease by quite a bit. So this was very, very successful. However, after 6 months, cobra attacks actually started to increase. And they started increasing at an alarming rate. So what do you think the problem was? Now, the problem was that they didn't look at the component of people and how people will react to this. So actually what happened is people are actually quite creative. Some of them started thinking this is a great way to make money. So they started to breed and grow cobras in their houses for the extra income. So now instead of, let's say, 1,000 cobras, people would have cobras in their houses. And when the government became aware of this, what did they do? They canceled the reward program. However, when they canceled the reward program, cobra attacks actually started increasing even more. Because what happened is the people growing cobras in their houses said, well, the cobras are useless now, so they let them go. They actually released them. And the people breeding cobras actually caused the problem to even increase more. So this is just an example that the apparent solution to a problem might actually make the situation even worse. All right. And Abdullah, thank you for the wow. And actually, Usama, also thank you for commenting. Thank you very much. All right. So now, this brings us to the section about the steps that should be taken to solve problems in a structured and logical manner. So let's start with an overview of the problem-solving process. The first step involves defining the problem and making sure that the solution you are working on is solving the right problem. There are really countless times that I've seen people come up with a great solution after working on the problems for weeks. Then they go to their manager who says, great job, but you've solved the wrong thing. Therefore, it is really important to spend time up front agreeing on the problem you are trying to solve. The next step is about analyzing the situation and understanding the problem. The third step is data gathering, which can be done through research or through expert interviews. And the fourth step is about developing different options to address the problem. And finally, you have to prioritize because, as we said, you can't do everything at the same time. So let's start out with the first step, problem definition. In this step, you want to have a clear statement of the problem that you are trying to solve. Let me give you an example. Suppose you are working as a consultant and you are hired by a bottled water manufacturer. Let's call this organization My Water. And this organization is losing market share. So what would a good problem statement look like? Now, the statement has to be smart. What do I mean by smart? It's something that is used for KPIs, for targets, but here it's a little bit different. It has to be specific. That's something that's not general. It has to be measurable. It has to be action-oriented, something I can do something with. And it's relevant to the key problem, and it's time-bound, meaning that it has time. So I'm going to type in now different problem statements, and I want to ask you, Are these good problem statements? So how about the following problem statement? Can my water be managed differently to increase profitability? And I'll type this in just so you can see it. All right. So can my water be managed differently to increase profitability? Okay. So what do you think of this? Is this a good or a bad? Right, so Azzat says not good enough. All right, somebody else, Shireen, please. All right, Reem is typing also. Nope, Shireen says no. All right, some more. Just say good or bad. Good or bad. Bad, not measurable. It's too, okay, all right. So looks like everybody has the right answer. It is actually too general. Yes, of course, the answer is yes. Yes, it can be maybe managed differently, but it's not, it's general. It's not specific enough. There's no actions that can be done. All right, so I'm going to type in another actually problem statement and tell me just if it's good or bad. All right, so the problem statement is, should my water improve its market share? So let me type it. Okay, so what do you think, good or bad? Bad? As I said, bad. Say everybody's saying bad, still not specific. I think it could be stated better. All right, bad, bad. All right, you're absolutely right. It is bad. It is not good. So the statement should be smart. Again, it should be something like this. What actions can my water take to improve its market share by 20% in the next year? So I'll type this in. Now, this is just an example. What actions can my water take to increase market share by 20%? So it's very specific and it's measurable. It says, if you increase your market share by 20% or not, it's action oriented. So basically, I can spend a few weeks figuring out what are some of the things that my water can do to actually increase its market share. And you don't want to be trying to solve a problem that is not stated. All right, so good, excellent. So let's go on to the next thing, which is basically your situation analysis. Now, after we spent time on defining the problem, the next step is situation analysis. Situation analysis is basically, what can I do to understand the problem? What can I do to understand the strengths, the weaknesses? What should I do? Now, there are very different tools that consulting companies use to understand the situation and understand the problem better. SWOT analysis is something very simple that a lot of people use. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats, or really any other framework. But the main purpose of this step is trying to understand the problem and trying to brainstorm what the possible root causes of a problem are. What I have here is a problem analysis tool that is also very common, and it's called the fishbone diagram or the Ishikawa diagram. And it really is something that we talk about. We talk about all these different tools in the course on the effective analyst that we run at Merck. But the basic reason you want to do this is to get a better understanding of the problem and find out what the root cause is. So let's go back to our car accidents problem. One category, for example, can be people. And under people, there are many different issues. So for example, car accidents are caused by distracted people, by distracted drivers. It's caused by skill level. Could be caused by age. It could be caused by speeding. And car accidents could be also caused by people crossing the street in areas where they're not supposed to. And one of the things, for example, that a lot of countries working on this might miss is that the infrastructure And a lot of car accidents can be caused by road conditions and not the best road conditions. So how do you determine the root cause? Well, that's where you need to go to the next step. And the next step is about data gathering. So what are different sources for gathering data? So if you can just please type in very quickly just one way that we can actually gather data. So if you had to gather data about car accidents, where would you go? What would you do? Right, Osama is typing, I can see that. Drivers, okay, so, right. Humans, interviews with drivers, okay, good, right. So data gathering, police station, okay, good. So a lot of you survey, so a lot of you are saying things like research with people, you can do focused interview, you can look at industry reports, thank you Osama, you can look at insurance, police, spare parts. So data gathering can be done in different ways. This includes secondary research, which is research that is already available. So for example, government reports, consultants, competitive benchmarking, and it can also include primary research that you do yourselves. So surveys, questionnaires, Arshad was saying the internet, but it also involves your own knowledge as well as expert interviews. But the most important thing is the data you collect has to be valid, meaning it is up to date and not expired. You can't be looking at car accidents 10 years ago. So for example, I was doing one exercise today on developing public policy with some of the attendees, and they were really surprised to see smartphones being a problem causing car accidents today. 10 years ago, they were not a problem. But as we started thinking about it, it actually made sense because 10 years ago, people didn't have smartphones and they weren't texting or actually looking at Facebook or WhatsApp during driving. And then one person said, yes, he was actually driving between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And he swore to me that one person driving was actually reading a newspaper and looking at their phone at the same time. Very, very dangerous. Now, another thing, it has to be objective, so it has to be based on facts and not your own opinions. It has to be comparable, meaning that you have to be able to find out if it's doing better or worse, and it needs to be comprehensive, and of course, it should be acceptable. The data that you get has to be credible. Now, let me give you an example on data gathering and how it can actually be the difference between life and death. In 1911, two teams, one British and the other Norwegian, wanted to be the first to discover the South Pole. One team collected all the data they can. They learned what worked in very cold conditions. They went as far as to live with Eskimos near the North Pole to learn how they moved in sub-zero temperatures, what they wore. They reviewed every conceivable situation that the team might encounter in their way to the South Pole. Now, the other team's preparation was limited. What plans they made were based on intuitive conclusions rather than direct research of the environment they were entering. The team that gathered good data actually were the Norwegians, and they were the first to plant their flag. Unfortunately, the other British team didn't make it, and they died about 10 miles away from the Norwegian flag. So I don't want to make it appear that always gathering data is life and death, but in your project, it's something that's very, very important to actually do well. Now, what's the next step? After we've collected the right data, the next step is developing options. And this can be done in many ways. You can rely on your own understanding of the problem. Remember, you've done a situation analysis, you've actually looked at industry reports, you've spoken to insurance, police, you have a really good understanding of the problem. But you also need to rely on the expertise of others. So for example, when it comes to car accidents, you can look at what other countries have done, how they've solved the problem, and also what mistakes they've fallen into. You can also rely on brainstorming with your team to come up with different ideas. The important thing is not to just rely on people you think know the problem and are expert, but you also want to get ideas from people who have a diverse set of background. Now, these options can be put together in a type of a matrix that allows decision makers to have better information. As an analyst, you need to think of different ways to present your data. Charts, for example, are a very good way, but you need to make it easy for the decision maker to understand the data, as they've not had the same time as you to go into the details of the problem. So for example, I've presented here 3 different options for the decision maker, and I've detailed the points that the decision maker is interested in. For example, cost, how risky it is, how suitable it is to implement this particular option. The last step is about prioritization. To help in your prioritization exercise, you can plot your different solutions on this type of matrix. On one hand, you can have feasibility, for example, how easy it is to do a project, and on the other side, you can think of how much impact this type of solution will have. Now, using this matrix, you can see how difficult, easy it is, and how much it would cost to do different types of projects. Now, this brings us to the conclusion of the slides on becoming an effective analyst and the steps you need to take to successfully solve a problem. Now, if you or anyone you know would like to learn more about this topic, then please consider signing up for this course. It will be held in Dubai on October 9th or in May 2017. The exact day for 2017 in May will be published on our website soon. The course is 5 days and it's a lot of fun. We'll be going into much more detail on the process of problem solving. We also have a customized case where analysts will start on day 1 presented with a problem, and they'll work on a solution through the next 5 days, and on day 5 they'll have to present their solution to the decision maker. I'd like to now open up our discussion for questions. So if you have a question, please type it into the text box and I will try to answer as many questions as possible. All right, I see Camelia is typing a question, so I'll definitely give you a minute or so to type in your questions. Right, and Salisu is also typing in a question, so take your time. I'll still be here, don't worry. All right, what do you suggest if your manager always rejected your suggestions, I want to say, or your recommendations? All right, so Wasim asks that, what do you suggest if your manager always rejects your recommendations or your solutions? So I would suggest that you'd actually figure out, why is your manager always rejecting your suggestions? Is it because your manager doesn't know what the steps that you've taken are? Do you actually show him the steps that you've taken logically? Or is it maybe even a personal situation? The problem is, I've seen actually people reject suggestions because it's a personal problem between them and a colleague. But I think you can actually have a logical approach if you sit down with your manager and say, okay, let's first of all work together and define the problem. And then once you've defined the problem, the next session is about getting to a common understanding of the problem by going through and actually together working on dissecting it into its different parts. But one of the things that maybe you can do, Wasim, is to try to make it appear that your manager has come up with a suggestion and not really you. So you help him come up with the situation analysis, structure the problem, break it down, whereas he naturally says, aha, this is the solution that I suggest. So hopefully that answers your question. Now, the other question I have is from Abdullah. Are all the problems faced have a solution in corporates? Realistically, please. So, of course, the answer is no. There are some solutions that you can't come up with. Let me give you an example. So right now, BlackBerry has a big problem. What is the problem that they have? They went from market share 80% to nothing, really. Is there a solution to actually improve research in motion or BlackBerry's market share? I don't think so. I think that sometimes you can get to a problem so late that it's just too late to do anything, and you have to think of something else. Let me give you another example. Yahoo. So Yahoo used to be, at one point of time, used to be the highest, the most valuable company in the world. Its market cap reached amazing levels. And it actually had an opportunity to buy Google for $3 million only, right? And it missed that chance. Now, time went by and actually Google became much higher. So this is when, at the end, Yahoo had to be solved, and it was too late to actually come up with a solution to its problem. They hired somebody from Google, Marissa Mayer, but she came in too late. Sometimes the solution to the problem has already passed you by. All right. So, so we have Salisu going over the role of the analyst again. So just just to summarize, I think the role of the analyst is to solve problems. Basically, what we have right now is the most valuable person is a problem solver. Somebody who can communicate well, find out what the problem is, somebody who can connect between different people, but somebody who can structure problems, understand it logically, come up with a logical answer to a problem. So I think good analysts, successful analysts at the end are those who are able to understand what the real problems are and come up with good solutions to you. All right, so we have another question on an example for SWOT analysis. So the SWOT analysis is usually made up of 4 things. It's made up of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So let's say that you're doing a SWOT analysis for McDonald's, right? So hopefully everybody knows McDonald's. So if I had to say the strengths, for example, I think that McDonald's is one of the most known companies in the world. The kids love it. I don't know why, but my children always say they want to go to McDonald's. They're actually quite clean. They're one of the cleanest fast food restaurants in the world. They actually have a very good process. Now, what are their weaknesses? So their weaknesses are that they don't have high quality food. It's actually quite unhealthy. They have high turnover. A lot of their employees leave all the time. So what about threats? So threats are that they might be sued by government. There might be actually laws restricting the way of doing business. And opportunities. So opportunities, you think that they actually have an opportunity to change to more of a healthy style, and they've actually been doing that. So a situation analysis overall, this is very, very quickly, I'm sorry, we just don't have enough time to go through it, but this is very quickly where you can get a good understanding of what a company is going through. Now, Reem says, what if during data collection we are faced with conflicting data? Do intuition and gut play a role in finding a solution for a problem? So let me first of all think about data collection, and you're faced with conflicting data. So I've really faced this a lot. Data that is conflicting just doesn't make sense. Let me give you an example. When you're faced with conflicting data, you actually have to go in and I would want to know what are the sources of the data and actually how that data was arrived to. So for example, let's say that you're looking at car accidents and everybody you've talked to says car accidents are caused by younger people because they drive really fast, they have fast cars, they're reckless. But then you're looking at the data, and the data tells you that, actually young drivers are just as safe as older drivers. Now, what could be the issue? Sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper. So it turns out the issue is younger drivers never buy the cars themselves. They actually have their parents buy the car for them. So the car is actually registered to older people, even though younger people are having the accidents in them. So if you look into the data, sometimes the conflicting data can come from faulty sources. Now, do intuition and gut play a role in finding a solution? Absolutely. However, it tells you what the direction is. What you really need to have is you need to have logical data that can back up what you're finding. All right, so Abdullah, you have you say, Mr. Muhammad, I would love to have this presentation sent to me, please. So I'm glad to say that this presentation will be recorded and actually will be put on our website. So you can view the entire presentation. You can go over it again and you can show it to your colleagues, you can show it to your managers. So thank you very much. It's been great actually being here and talking with you. Thank you very much for your insightful questions. And I hope you will join us soon in one of our courses at Merck. Thank you.
Merck.com